Hello viewers, welcome to the video lecture series of Hand Embroiderer Class 10, Unit 1, Session 2. So we need to understand that emphasis is a principle of design. But before we understand the emphasis that is our today's topic, we must understand why do we need emphasis in place. So there is a long story behind it, and let me explain it. We know everything is made up of certain components, certain parts. What are these parts referred to as? These are referred to as the building blocks. Likewise, when we prepare a dish, we need ingredients. Similarly, when we make a building, we need raw materials. These raw materials are actually referred to as the building blocks. These building blocks in the design terminology are referred to as the elements of design. But do you think that just having these building blocks or raw materials is more than sufficient in order to make a building? Well, I believe that without the use of the right tools and processes, this cannot be constructed. And if this cannot be constructed, we need certain guidelines in place. What are these guidelines? These guidelines are referred to as the principles of design when we talk about in design terminology. One such principle is referred to as emphasis, and it actually helps us a lot while making any piece of art. Emphasis is a very important concept which has to be understood in detail. So let's understand emphasis in detail. Emphasis has been derived from two Greek words. Em is joint, and exhibit comes from the next part of it, that is fenin. So em and fenin together combined actually tell us to exhibit from within. With this understanding of the concept of emphasis, we understand whenever we have to give importance to anything, we emphasize. But how do we use it in design? We use it in design in order to create a focal point, a center of interest. In order to create a center of interest, we restrict the movement of eye to that one point where we want the viewer to concentrate. So where do we need emphasis? We need emphasis in every part of our life, whether that be design or any other field, so to say. But emphasis is always used to highlight the good points of anything and hide the defects that actually are present in that. In design also, we use it to hide the defects of a person, and we try and accentuate the good points of the person. Similarly, emphasis is also a concept that is used to highlight the good parts of the individual through the silhouette or the design. But how do we use it actually? There's a lot of caution that has to be taken into consideration. What is that caution? What needs to be emphasized, how that needs to be emphasized, and how much has to be emphasized is very important, because a wrong use of the same can actually lead to a complete mishap, and it is clearly evident in various fails that happen in the various fashion shows also. So it is important to use emphasis in a proper manner, bringing out the best and hiding out the rest. How do we use emphasis? While I must say that emphasis is a part of life, and that is used everywhere in our life. It can be seen being used at several places by repeating things, or it can be seen by giving some importance. So we come to a conclusion that emphasis can either be used by repeating things, that is repetition, or it can be created by giving more importance to one thing. Very important to consider over here is that emphasis is also a concept that has to be kept in mind while designing any piece of art. But how do we use it? So we can use it in several ways. Those several ways are nothing but the different ways of combining the different elements of design to create a wonderful piece of art. The various ways in which we can use emphasis are as follows. So one can be color, for which we can actually also show it in the form of an illustration. Second could be shape. So again, the different sizes of the shape, and also in terms of a silhouette, it can be shown in a similar manner. Not only this, contrast is one of the most important ones to consider while actually bringing about an emphasis in the design, which can be shown like this or can also be a part of the silhouette. These three were the most simple ones to use, but the more complicated ones are as follows. One can be size and dominance. Using it with caution is very important because it can actually lead to a wonderful design or can actually lead to a mishap. Next comes an isolation. This is mostly used when we talk about the accessories or when we talk about different elements being combined together. Last but not the least, but the most important one that can be talked about while creating an emphasis in design is detail. A simple silhouette can actually be made a wonderful one by creating detail at one end of the same. And this can also be shown in terms of a graphic. Thereby, we conclude that there are various ways to create emphasis in design also. Only thing to consider over here is that we must use it with caution. Similarly, emphasis is also an important part of design, whereby we try and create a focal point, a center of interest, and actually leave a lasting impression in the minds of the viewers. Not only does it create a center of interest and a lasting impression, but it restricts the movement of the eye on that one particular point that is there. It can also be referred to as a two-edged sword. So that is a point of caution. Since it is a two-edged sword, we must use it with a lot of care. Why? Because in case if it is not used at the right place, at the right time, and in the right proportion, it can actually lead to a failure. Thereby, we must remember the 3 points in consideration, that are what to emphasize, how to emphasize, and how much to emphasize before we emphasize any part of the design and make it dominant and others subordinate. This brings us to the end of. Keep learning, keep watching. Thank you.